We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Ches Amud Aleph in Mesechet Kesuvos. This is Kesuvos Daf 58a. On the previous summit, the Gemara was discussing why it is that an Arusa, let's say she's an Arusa to a Kohen, she's not allowed to have Truma. And so the Gemara had two opinions over there. Ula said that the reason an Arusa cannot have Truma is because we're afraid since she's in her father's house, so maybe she's going to give this Truma to her brother, to her sister, and of course they're not allowed to have Truma, so that would be a problem. And Rav Yehuda said a different answer. Rav Yehuda said it was Mishum Simphon, because maybe they're going to go back on the arrangement. Let's say he finds some blemish in her, and he decides not to marry her, and so then the whole thing is undone. So that's why we don't give her Truma at this point in time. And so the Gemara over here continues and says, what about by a situation of avodim? Why aren't we worried about simphon? Why aren't we worried about the same thing? And the Gemara says that's not really an issue, because when it comes to avodim, so if you have a situation of a blemish, first of all, we don't care about a blemish if it doesn't impede on the avoda, on the work that the Eved does. And let's say you're going to say that you find out that the person is kovyustus. Let's say you find out, as Rashi says here, kovyustus, gonev nefashos, he's a person who kidnaps, but he giyu, but that's something that came to the purchaser. He has to be aware that many avodim are like that. That would not be enough to undo a sale of an Eved, and therefore the idea of undoing a sale of an Eved, the idea of simphon, does not really apply. Rashi over here says, Higiu l'lokeach, that's what has reached the lokeach, ve'ena mekach batel. Just because he's a kovyustos, just because he's somebody who kidnaps, is not a reason to undo the purchase. Uvraisi v'baba basra b'hamocher peiros, and this is a braisa, in baba basra hamocher eved l'chaveiro v'nimtza ganev, o kovyustos, if a person sells an Eved to his friend, and it turns out that Eved is a ganev, or again, he's a kidnapper, Higiu shestaman ganav mehim, that's the stam situation. So that's also not a reason to annul the sale. And so the Gemara continues, Ma'ika, so what are you going to say? What can you find out about this Eved that you would maybe say would reverse the sale? So maybe list him Mizuyin, maybe he's like an armed robber, or Muchtav Lamalchus, or maybe he's somebody who the government is looking to kill him, somebody who has done a crime against the government that's worthy of the death penalty. So that would be something that is uncommon, and therefore you'd want to go back on the sale. But that also, Hanu Kala Islu, that's something that there's a clear call, there's a rumor about it, everybody knows that it would be true, and therefore if you would purchase an Eved in that situation, you would have been aware of it in the first place. And the Gemara says, Michli, let us see. Vein lamar uvein lamar. Whatever opinion you're going to give in terms of why the Arusa is not allowed to have Truma. Lo achla, so she's not allowed to have Truma. What's the difference if the reason is because of Simphon, or if the reason is because she's going to give to her relatives who are not allowed to have Truma? My beinayu, what's the difference between the two approaches? And the Gemara says, Ika beinayu, the difference is as follows. Kibel masar v'holach. You can have a situation of Kibel. Kibel means to say that he understood, he knew what the blemishes were, and he accepted them. And masar v'holach is when she's transferred away from her family, given over to agents of the husband. There's no concern that she's going to give it to her family. She'll give the truma to her brother or sister. Rashi over here says, first, Kola Islu, there's a kol, when you're talking about list of Mizuyin or Muchtav Lamalchus, V'savar V'kabil, the buyer already agreed to it. Kibel Masar V'halach, Kibel Olav Ba'alas Hamumin L'simfon. Let's say you have a situation where the husband accepted the blemishes, so L'simfon, L'ekal L'mechash, there's no concern about Simfon. L'shem Atashke, L'achiv L'achos, L'ekal L'mechash, but you still have a concern, maybe she'll give to drink the truma to her brother or her sister, and the other way is follows, Masar Av L'shluchi Abal. Let's say the father, she's no longer in the rishus of the father, she's given over to the Shluchi Abal, or Shalchu Shluchi Avim Shluchi Abal, or the Shluchim of the father go with the Shluchim of the husband. Lekal Mechash Shem Atashke L'achiv L'achos, so there's no concern she's going to give to drink to her brother or sister. D'ales no Gaba, they're not buyer anymore. V'ikol Mechash L'simfon, but there's still this concern for Simfon. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Rabbi Tarfon Omer Nosin Lo Hakol Truma V'chulu. Let's say the time for the wedding has arrived, and they haven't gotten married yet, so we said that let's say she's marrying a Kohen, so she can have Truma. So Rabbi Tarfon says he can give her all Truma, and then let's say at times that she's Tameh, so then she'll just sell the Truma and she'll use the money to get Chulin. That's how she'll support herself. But Rabbi Akiva says no, he has to give her half Truma and half Chulin, meaning at times that she can't have the Truma, so then she'll use the Chulin. She doesn't have to go to the trouble of selling the Truma to get the Mizonos for herself. And the Gemara says, Amar Abaya says, Machlokus bevas Kohen leKohen. This whole Machlokus, Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva, is when the daughter of a Kohen is marrying a Kohen, so she knows what to do with Truma, so it would make sense then you give her Truma. Avol bebas Yisrael leKohen, but if you have a Bas Yisrael marrying a Kohen, she's not accustomed to dealing with Truma. Everybody agrees he should give her half Chul and half Truma, because again, at times that she's Tameh, she's not going to know how to handle the Truma properly, she'll defile the Truma. And the Gemara continues, V'yamar Abaya, and Abaya Abaye says, Machlokas ba'arusa. This whole machlokas is by an arusa, by a woman who's betrothed. Aval b'nesua, but let's say she's married, divrei hakol, then everybody agrees, mechza chulin u'mechza truma. It should be half chulin and half truma. Again, we're not going to make her, when she's married, to go out and take truma and have to sell it. As Rashi over here says, first ba'arusa, uvas kohen, the whole v'bevei savia, tarach avia limchor truma b'chulin limei tuma, lefishu ragal b'kach. When she's in the house of her father, so her father will take care of it in terms of selling the truma so that she can have mizonos. Aval b'nesua, shenosin la ba'ala mizonos b'veisa, but when you're talking about a nesua, in that case, when he's giving her mizonos, kagon mashre ishto al yedei shlish, let's say you have a situation where a person gives support to his wife through a third party, let's say for whatever reason, they're not living together, to tanan v'masnis, and that's in a Mishnah later on, so you could have a situation of a nesua where she's actually in a separate residence, but mechza chulin, but in that case, it's going to be half chulin and half truma, because she's a nesua, lefisha kol kavoda bas melech penima, because she's not someone who's supposed to go outside and sell this stuff and go out in public in that fashion. It's not appropriate. In this case, by a nesua, her father, her brother are not present. They can't help her out in terms of selling it. And so that's why Abai is saying by a nesua, everybody agrees it's going to be mechza chulin and mechza truma. And the Gemara continues, Tanya namihachi, we have a brisa that says the same thing. Rabbi Tarfon Omer, Rabbi Tarfon says, Nosnin lo hakol truma. Again, just like our Mishnah, he can give her all truma. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Rabbi Akiva says, mechza chulin umechza truma. He should give her half chulin and half truma. Bamed devarim amurim, and when is this true? B'vas kohen l'kohen. Again, when it's the daughter of a kohen marrying a kohen. Avol bas yisrael l'kohen. But if you have a bas yisrael marrying a kohen, divrei hakol mechza chulin umechza truma. Everybody agrees he has to give her half chulin and half truma. And again, the brisa qualifies bamed devarim amurim. When is this true? Ba'arusa, it's true only by a situation of erusin. Avol b'nesua. But if it's a married woman, divrei hakol mechza chulin umechza truma. Everybody agrees it's half chulin and half truma. And the Brisa brings some other opinions. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says, Nosnin lo shtei yodos shel truma v'yacha shel chulin. You actually have to give, when you're giving truma, it should be double the amount of truma from the amount of chulin that you give. By giving the extra portion of truma, it makes it easier for her to be able to sell it in order to get the money she needs to support herself. Rabbi Yehuda says, Nosin lo hakol truma. He gives her all truma. It seems that Rabbi Yehuda is saying the same thing as Rabbi Tarfon. Rashi will explain. V'imocheres v'lokeches b'damim chulin. Again, she'll sell and she'll use the money for chulin. And Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says, Kol makom shehuzkara truma, anytime that truma is mentioned, nosnin lo kiflayim b'chulin, so then you're going to give double the amount that you give for the chulin. My beinayu, and the Gemara says, what's the difference between them? Ika beinayu tircha, the difference between the opinions over here is whether we burden her with having to sell the truma in order to get money. Rashi over here explains, Rabbi Yehuda Omer nosnin lo hakol truma. Rabbi Yehuda says, you give the entire thing truma. So first Rashi explains, Bein Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Tarfon. First of all, in terms of the difference between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Tarfon, they both seem to say you give her all truma. So Ika, there is a difference as follows. The Ilu Rabbi Tarfon suffer, because Rabbi Tarfon he holds, knows in la truma kedei mizon oseh. You give her truma according to the amount of sustenance she needs. V'afal pishim tzricha lechulin. Now, even though let's say she can't have the truma, she's tamei or something like that, so then she needs chulin. Ubo limchor truma. Now she's going to need to sell the truma. Ein demei truma magian likach ben chulin. The value she's going to get for the truma is not going to be as much as she needs for the chulin. Sharei yikarim heimin truma, because chulin is more valuable than truma. Shakol kovsim alein, because everyone wants to purchase it. There's more demand, so it's a higher price. So that's what Rabbi Tarfon says, so she loses out in that sense. Well, Rabbi Yehuda, but according to Rabbi Yehuda, nosin la truma kashir, shimbasa likach mechza chulin lo sifchos min demei mechza chulin. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you have to give a little more truma, so that when she goes to sell it, it will end up giving her enough chulin, the chulin that she needs. Avotorach mechira mutal alel limchor lasita tachas chulin. But still, she does have the burden of having to sell it, of having to find people to buy it in order to support herself. And Rashi continues with Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel's opinion, nosin la truma kiflayim b'chulin. You give truma double the amount of the chulin. Kasavar, because Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel holds lo matrachinin lo lemocher b'shavia. We don't even say that she has to sell it according to its worth. She can sell it for very cheap in a very easy fashion. Elanosin la truma harbe. He gives it a lot of truma kadesha titinena bezol, so that she'll be able to sell it again at a very cheap price. V'timsaloch and harbe. She'll find a lot of people to buy it, and in that fashion it will be easy to sell in order to support herself. And then the Gemara said, "My beinayu." What's the difference between them? And the understanding is, what's the difference between Rabbi Yehuda, where she's given all truma, and Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, where she's given double the amount of truma. And the Gemara answered, the difference is how much tircha. Bein Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, again, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's going to be more of a tircha because she's not getting so much truma that it's going to be easy to sell for the amount of money that she needs. Whereas according to Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, she's given plenty of truma, double the amount that she needs, in order that she can sell it quickly and support herself. And we will just note over here as well that the difference between Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira and Rav Shimon ben Gamliel is as follows. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira is saying that you give her, it's not half and half truma, half chulin, but you give her 2/3 truma, one-third chulin, but that doesn't mean that you're giving double the amount of truma that is needed in terms of being able to support herself so she could sell it easily. Whereas Rav Shimon ben Gamliel is saying kiflayim, he means to say that you're giving double the amount that is needed in order that it's easy for her to sell it at a cheap price and she can support herself easily. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Hayavam eino machil b'truma, in a situation of Yibam, if they haven't actually consummated the marriage yet, she's just a shomeres Yavam, so then she's not allowed to eat truma, again assuming the Yavam is a Kohen. And the Gemara says, my time, what's the reason? Kinyan kaspo amar achmana, because it talks about a kinyan when we're talking about a situation of truma, of a high kinyan da'achivu, and over here where she's awaiting Yibam, so she's really a kinyan to his brother, the brother who died. It's not really his kinyan, and therefore she cannot have truma. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Asta shisha chadashim b'fnei habal. Let's say she was 6 months in front of her husband waiting for marriage, then he died, and then 6 months for the Yavam. That's not going to be enough in order to eat truma. And then the Mishnah went on to say the same thing if the majority was done in front of the husband, then a little bit in front of the Yavam, or the same thing, let's say most of it was in front of the Yavam and a little bit in front of the husband. And so the Gemara asks, Hashta b'fnei habal amrit lo, if you already said that if the majority was in front of the husband, that's not good enough. So b'fnei hayavam miboy, does the Mishnah even need to tell me about the situation of the Yavam? That's so obvious. The Yavam is the one that doesn't allow her to eat truma. And to that the Gemara says, Zu v'yein tzarich lomar zu katani. The Mishnah means to say this, and not only this, meaning in this case it's not, and even in this case it's also not going to be okay. Rashi over here says, Hashta b'fnei habal chutz miyom echad. You already said if she's in front of the husband, all of it, except for one day. Amr, you said, lo achla, she doesn't eat truma. So kulam b'fnei hayavam. So if she's in front of the Yavam the entire time, the al yado ein lo lechel, he's not able to let her eat truma. The lav kinyanu, because she's not considered his kinyan. Mi boy le lememer de lo achel. Do we even need to say that? It's obvious. And then again, the Gemara says it was zu vein tzarich lomar zu, this case. And then, of course, I don't even need to tell you, but that case as well, she's not going to get truma. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Zu Mishnah Rishona v'chulu, according to the first version of the Mishnah. So then we say that when the time arrives for the marriage, even when they don't get married, she's allowed to have truma. But according to the Mishnah Achrona, that was not the case. The later Bezin says that she's not allowed to have truma until she actually goes under the chuppah. And the Gemara says, my time, so what is the reason for this? Meaning to say, what is the reason that the later Bezin says that she has to actually get married in order to get the truma? Amar Ula, so Ula says, V'yiteimer Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda. Some people say it's Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda who gives this answer. Mishum Simfon. It's because of Simfon. That's the same reason we gave earlier. Earlier we said that an Arus is not allowed to have truma because of Simfon, because maybe he'll find some blemish and he'll go back on the whole marriage. And the same thing over here. You've gotten to the time of the marriage, but if they haven't actually entered the chuppah, maybe there's going to be a reason he's going to have to retract. There's going to be some kind of blemish, and so therefore she's not supposed to have truma. And the Gemara says, Bishlama le'ula, I understand according to Ula, so meaning Ula on the previous Amud who said the reason an Arusa can't have is because she might give the truma to her other relatives. So Kamaisa Shem Yimzugula Kos Bevesavia, the first part of the Mishnah was saying maybe she's going to give the truma in the house of her father to her relatives. That's why she can't have it. She can't have truma immediately as an Arusa. She has to wait until the time for the wedding has arrived. Uvasraisa Mishum Simfon, and then the later part of the Mishnah Achrona, has an additional concern, has a new concern of Simfon, and that's the reason why she has to wait till she actually goes under the chuppah. We understand how that works according to Ula. We'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Ches Amud Beis.